Getting ready to buy or sell a home? Do you want to help support pro-life organizations? Then you need Real Estate for Life. Get a top-notch real estate agent and support pro-life causes. Go to realestateforlife.org to learn more.
Amen. Dear brothers and sisters in Christ, today, November 14, the Roman Catholics and some Eastern Catholics remember Saint Josaphat. This is who we celebrate today, a bishop and a monk whose example of faith inspired many Eastern Orthodox Christians to return to full communion to the Holy See. He was born in the year 1580 in the western Ukrainian region of Volhynia. And John, which was his name, his given name, did not become Josaphat until he was later became a monk. He also was not initially a full member of the Catholic Church, born to the Greek Orthodox Christian Church, to parents whose church had fallen out then with communion with the Holy Father. Although the Eastern churches began to separate from the See in the year 1054, as we know, with his great Schism, which was the split between the East and the West, a union had existed, some kind of union, after the 15th century, where we see the Ecumenical Council of Florence. There was some kind of union at this stage, but social, political, and theological disputes caused the union to begin to dissolve even before the Turkish conquest of the Byzantine Empire in 1453. By John's time then, many Slavic Orthodox Christians had become strongly anti-Catholic. During this time, many Latin missionaries attempted to achieve reunion with the individual Eastern patriarchs, but this was risky and sometimes led to even further fractions and divisions. John was trained as a merchant's apprentice when he was young and could have opted for marriage, but he felt drawn then to the rigors and the spiritual depth of the traditional Byzantine monasticism. Taking the monastic name of Josaphat, he entered a Ukrainian monastery in the year 1604. The young monk was taken on an ambitious task, striving to reincorporate the Eastern Orthodox tradition with the authority of the Catholic Church in this era of its counter-Reformation. This was his inspiration, this was his life's work. Soon as a priest, subsequently then also as an archbishop, and ultimately as a martyr, he would live and die for the union of the churches. While rejecting the anti-Western sentiments of many of his countrymen, Josaphat also resisted any attempt to compromise the Eastern Catholic Church's own traditions, his Greek Orthodox Church. Recognizing the urgent pastoral needs of the people, he produced catechisms and works of apologetics, while implementing long overdue reforms of the clergy and also attending with great tenderness to the needs of the poor. Josaphat's then his exemplary life and zeal for the care and the salvation of souls won the trust of many Orthodox Christians who saw the value of the Church's reunion reflected in the life itself of this great Archbishop and his works. Nevertheless, his mission was essentially controversial, and others were very suspicious of his intentions. In the year 1620, opponents even arranged for the consecration of a rival archbishop. As tensions between the supporters and opponents began to escalate, Josaphat was complaining. He lamented the onset of attacks that would lead to his death. He said, "You people want to put me to death. You people want to put me to death, he protested. You make ambushes for me everywhere, in the streets, on the bridges, on the highways, and in the marketplace. I am here among you as a shepherd, and you ought to know that I would be happy to give my life for you. This is what happened. He finally did so on the fall day in 1623. There was an Orthodox priest who had been shouting outside of his residence where he lived as an archbishop, and trying to force his way inside. Josaphat had him removed, but the man assembled then a mob of people in the town. They arrived and demanded the archbishop's life, threatening his companions and servants. Unable to escape, Josaphat died, praying for the men who shot and then beheaded him before dumping his body in the river. Saint Josaphat's body was discovered Incorrupt 5 years later. Also, we learn that the perpetrators of this crime also had, virtually all of them, had a conversion through the prayers of Josaphat. Remarkably, the saint's one-time rival, the Orthodox Archbishop Miraculous, also reconciled with the Catholic Church years later. Saint Josaphat then was canonized by the Catholic Church in 1867. Remember the words he said as a good pastor in the Gospel we read today. Josaphat said, "I would be happy to give my life for you." The Good Shepherd we read in the Gospel today lays his life down for his sheep as Saint Josaphat. The Good Shepherd is not afraid of him who can kill the flesh, but not harm the soul. The Good Shepherd is not afraid to shed his blood for the faith. This is the grace of martyrdom. Are we ready to embrace this martyrdom? We can ask ourselves today. Surely it will come when we see this wicked world we are wrapped in this deluge of sin. The way forward surely will be martyrdoms to renew the Catholic Church, and also the way forward must be the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, to have a supernatural intervention to remedy all the evils we see in the world, which seems to be going out of control. Have no fear then, dear brothers and sisters in Christ, be not afraid. Look at all the ways we see the faithful being martyred through the passage of time with their courage. Some were beheaded, some were hung, some were drowned or even burnt alive. Some eaten by wild animals or thrown from precipices. Some of the peasant families in the French Revolution, in this area called the Vendée. This is the area where we see now there was a huge genocide, and these were the great Catholics in this area who were formed really by the slavery and the consecration to Our Lady by Saint Louis de Montfort. These peasants in the French Revolution, with their ears, their tongues, noses, arms and feet cut off and left en masse to bleed to death. Children, mothers and fathers. Some left to die of starvation in this means of death and martyrdom, and some as the Lord of glory crucified in a most violent way. Almost, as we can see, ingenious methods to show how clever man can be against the dignity of a fellow man when he allows himself to become an instrument of Satan. Consider the example in this magnificent courage of an unknown English martyr, saint, who died for the faith during the Reformation. Wind the clock back to the year 1594, Father, if you've not heard, Father John Gerard was one of the only priests to escape, a Jesuit, from the Tower of London. Read his book called The Hunted Priest. He opened a house of refuge for hiding priests in London and asked a newly widowed lady called Anne Lynn despite her ill health, to take charge of it. By 1597, 3 years later, this house had become insecure, so then another house had to be opened again in London, and again Anne Lynn was placed in charge. On the 2nd of February 1601, Father Francis Page was saying the sacrifice, celebrating the sacrifice of the Holy Mass in the house managed by Anne Lynn when men arrived to arrest him. The priest managed to slip into a special hiding place, one of these hiding holes that had been built around the country to protect the clergy. So the priest managed to hide in the place prepared by Anne and afterwards to escape, but she was then arrested with 2 other lay people. She was then tried and taken to the Old Bailey, the courthouse in London, on the 26th of February. She was so weak that she had to be carried to the trial on a chair. She told the court then that far from regretting having concealed the priest, she only grieved that she could not receive 1,000 more. The judge then sentenced her to hang the next day at Tyburn. Anne Lynn was hanged on the 27th of February 1601. She was executed immediately before 2 priests, Father Roger Philcock and Father Mark Backworth. Though as a woman she was spared the disemboweling that they endured. This was the common practice where the Catholic priest would be hung, drawn and quartered. Another term is being disemboweled. She was spared that, being a woman. At the scaffold, then, this is the courage of this great martyr and great saint. Every time before the Reformation and when at a point of execution, they were generally given the chance to retract and support the king or the queen, or to try to save their lives. Most of these Catholic priests and martyrs passed on their forgiveness for the executioners and said words for the glory of God. This is what she said. She repeated her words at the scaffold, which she had said during her trial, declaring loudly to the bystanders. She said, "I am sentenced to die for harbouring a Catholic priest. And so far am I from repenting for having so done that I wish with all my soul that where I have entertained one, I could have entertained 1,000. This is the words of courage, and this is to give us encouragement in these days to be courageous and have this great fortitude to face what surely will come. This is the courage we need to ponder now, to have the courage of a lion to confront what the world will place before us, to deny our faith, our Catholic faith, to have the courage and strong fortified will of Anne Lynn, to have the courage of all courage and the fortitude of all fortitudes of the Blessed Virgin Mary, then standing at the foot of the cross to bring us home with Saint Josaphat to paradise one day, God willing. Amen. May the holy names of Jesus and Mary, Joseph be blessed now and forever. In the name of the Father, and of the Son,